Hi everybody and welcome back to my little YouTube channel. If you're new to this channel, my name's Amanda. I'm a diagnosed autistic adult and I'm 40 years old. I want to just talk a little bit about my life before I was diagnosed with autism and after I was diagnosed with autism and everything that sort of happened in between. Let me get on with the video. So when I first realised that I felt different to everybody else, I felt like I didn't fit in, I think was when I was doing my GCSEs. And I think most autistic people can probably relate to that because it's the time where you go to a little bit of a bigger school and you're expected to socialise and fit in and have friends and just understand social nuances, jokes and sarcasm, and everything sort of started to fall apart in my life a little bit when I started my GCSEs because I couldn't understand other people around me. I had a couple of friends, Carrie and Jessica. They wasn't like friends that like you go out shopping, although I did do that on a couple of occasions, and to the cinema, the pictures, the movies or whatever you call it in the USA or wherever. It was more acquaintances with me. I nearly fell back and died. It was more acquaintances with me, so I didn't have that proper friendship, and it all started to fall apart a little bit during my GCSEs. I think I was okay before then because I was sort of a child and I was just growing up. But I think most autistic people can relate. Once you go to your GCSEs and your AS levels and your A levels, you're expected to form social groups and you're expected to make friends and go shopping and mingle and go to parties and have boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, whatever. And that was really difficult for me, and I think it was around about that time I started to realise that I was different to other people, and the penny sort of dropped a little bit that I couldn't understand jokes, or when somebody was I used to get bullied, for example, and the person bullying me was really sarcastic, and of course I didn't understand that they was being sarcastic. I thought that they was just being friendly. And that made the bullying worse because then they'd be more sarcastic and then they'd start pushing and hitting me. And so just understanding the intentions of other people was really difficult, and I started to realise during my GCSEs that I wasn't making friends, or people was misunderstanding me, or I was misunderstanding other people, and I was incredibly isolated from other social groups. I was watching friends, acquaintances more than friends really, get in little social gatherings and groups and go shopping and go to the movies and do things that teenagers do, and I wasn't. I was on the sideline. I was with them maybe sometimes, but I was not with them. Does that make sense? While they was all in their social gatherings, I was at the back or somewhere else in that social area by myself, just watching them, and that's what I felt like during my GCSEs. I felt like a spectator for most of the time, and I'm sure you can resonate with that word. Autistic people, we often feel like a spectator of life. I think that's a really good word to use actually. If I ever wrote a book, it would be called The Spectator, because that's how I feel. Other people are involved and they understand, and I'm just watching and observing, and that's what we do, we people watch. And I think during my GCSEs was the time that I started to realise that I was a little bit different to everybody else. And so I can remember going to places like social clubs. I can't remember what it was called. It was like this club that you'd go to at like 6 p.m. in the UK, and they'd have music and they'd have bright lights, and you could play sports there if you wanted to. There's a big sort of sports complex next to it, or you could watch films, and you was just interacting with other people. You could just spend time in social groups, and so I used to go there. But while everybody else was doing their thing, I was either being picked on and bullied. People would kick me and be just horrible to me. Like most people get bullied when they're younger, but autistic people, I think, we get picked on and bullied more than non-autistic people because we're fundamentally different, I suppose, to other people. But I used to just sit in another room while everybody was in the little social groups, and I'd just be eating sweets. And I used to watch my friends, Carrie and Jessica, having boyfriends. And I remember I used to watch them, and I didn't understand that ability to make relationships with others or formulate relationships. And I always felt incredibly isolated and alone as a child, because although it seemed to other people that I was just shy, maybe shy was a word that was commonly used in the 1990s when I was a teenager, she's just shy. It wasn't shyness, it was a misunderstanding of other people and anxiety. And although it came across to other people that I maybe wanted to spend time on my own, I didn't. I wanted to be included. I wanted to be part of the group. I wanted to have boyfriends. I wanted to have that teenager experience that all my friends and companions were having, but I just wasn't able to. And then what happened is I developed an eating disorder. And of course, in the 1990s, psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors thought that eating disorders was just this obsession with food. And some of the time it is, but they didn't really know much in those days about autism, unfortunately. And I used to say to my dad, I think there's more to this eating disorder than just this obsession with weighing myself. I got so poorly that I was under psychiatric care. And although it's a little bit of a taboo subject and we've got to be really careful what we say on social media about eating disorders, it's a real thing, and there's a real connection between eating disorders and autism spectrum conditions, which of course when I was younger they didn't know about. And so I wasn't treated for autism at the time, I was treated for something different, and that can be a real problem if you've got an eating disorder and autism. So although it's a little bit of a taboo subject, talking about eating disorders, there is a direct correlation between eating disorders and autism. And so although it's really tricky talking about it on social media because it can be flagged as triggering for people with eating disorders, I think at the same time it's so important that we talk about it and get the awareness out there about the connection, the correlation between autism and eating disorders, because it's a true correlation, and the more people that are aware of the correlation between the two, the more people can go for an autism diagnosis. Although I believe in this day and age psychiatrists and psychologists assess for Asperger's, for autism, if somebody presents with an eating disorder. They didn't do when I was younger in the 1990s, and of course I was then treated for an eating disorder solely when actually it was autism. And a lot of the time, eating disorders and autism, especially from my point of view, from me experiencing it when I was a teenager, it is due to having a need for control in your life. So this desire for maintaining order. And so I used to have loads of graphs. I used to weigh myself, and I used to have loads of graphs, mathematical graphs, every 3 or 4 times a day. And I would put these graphs behind the kitchen door, and I'd have to do them as part of my routine and ritual. And so I went through all that in my adolescence, and I was quite poorly. And that really, I think, spoilt my growing up, because a lot of autistic people can relate. We go through such incredible anxiety and incredible loneliness, and then when you're suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, which I also had as well, washing my hands constantly, and that was part of routine and ritual, and eating disorders, it can isolate us from other people, and it can take away our growing up, it can take away our adolescence. And I want you to know that if you're suffering from an eating disorder or OCD, you're not on your own. And so that went on through my GCSEs. So not only was I like socially isolated and excluded from my peers, I was picked on and bullied terribly. I mean, terribly picked on by people around me for being just misunderstood. And then add to that an eating disorder, which just stole all my childhood. It was just awful. And then obsessive compulsive disorder, where I was checking behind me. I was looking behind my shoulder constantly and washing my hands constantly. It was these routines and rituals that just consumed my life. It literally was the most consuming part of my adolescence. It ate my adolescence or my childhood, and so I missed out on everything else that people that don't have autism get to experience in life, which I'm sure you can relate if you're going through any of these things. It's incredibly damaging for our long-term mental health. And then I went on to study my AS levels and my A levels, and I studied biology and geography and English was something that I really loved because one of my special interests was writing poetry, so I was really passionate about that. And in fact, I really enjoyed my AS and A levels. The problem was I then started developing really bad anxiety surrounding looking people in the eyes, and I found that during my AS and A levels I wasn't able to maintain or keep eye contact with people. And so what I used to do was I used to take in my revision books or a pen and paper, and I didn't take it in to study and revise. It was an excuse. I did it so that wherever I went, in the classroom or outside the classroom, I could just get my revision book and pen and paper and write. And I used to write and write and write that much. I suffered from a huge ganglion, that's a fluid-filled cyst on my hand. And I did it so that I could look down and pretend that I was just revising and studying. But the true reason was, I didn't do it to study or learn more about the subject I was studying. I did it so that I wouldn't have to make eye contact with people. And it came across as being socially acceptable because people thought, my acquaintances, my lecturers thought, she's just studying, she's just looking down writing in a book, when actually I was doing it so that I wouldn't have to make eye contact with people. But even by doing that and looking down constantly, friends and family just didn't understand why I was doing it. And I used to wear a cap a lot of the time, and I didn't do it to stop the sun or because it looked cool or it was fashionable. I wore a cap so that people couldn't see my eyes. And oftentimes I remember my grandma pulling my cap up or off and telling me to look people in the eyes because I was being rude. And it was incredibly damaging to my self-esteem because then that forced me to do something that I didn't want to do, and it caused me incredible stress. So a lot of the time, autistic people, although there's so much more support now and understanding, a lot of the time family and friends don't understand us, and some of the things they say and do can be incredibly damaging to us in the long term. And we have really good memories, and that's something I'll never forget, and it really did traumatise me, and I'm sure I still feel the knock-on effects of that trauma to this day. Because I used to spend so much time with books and just writing things down, I did really well eventually. I had to resit a couple of my exams during my AS levels, and that is purely because a lot of the time questions that can be asked to autistic people need to be tailored to autistic people. So exam papers, for example, a lot of the time I can misunderstand what's being asked of me, and because it's on a paper, I don't have anybody to explain it in a different way. And so I didn't do very well at a couple of my exams, and so I had to resit a couple of my exams at the time, which was fine. But because I'd studied so much looking down at my papers, I did really well and I got into university. But it didn't help my autistic traits because I felt incredibly isolated when I started university, watching all of the other people socialising and going to parties and social clubs and gatherings and forming groups. And I think I felt even worse about my autism, although we didn't know it was autism, but I felt even worse then because I felt even more different to everybody else. So when I started university, I think it was then that I realised that I was really struggling to make eye contact, and I said to my lecturer, I'm really sorry. I got the courage to do it actually, which was really good for me at the time because I had so much social anxiety. I went up to the lecturer and I said, I'm so sorry. I have the most incredible anxiety that I'm struggling to make eye contact. This was at the University of Huddersfield, and they was just the best lecturers that I could have ever asked for. He was called Christopher Davis, and another lecturer was called Veronica Newton, and they was the bestest people in the whole wide world. They was the most understanding people that I've ever had in my entire life, more understanding than family. And I remember Veronica saying to me, don't worry, it's okay. And those words just calmed me so much and made me feel so much better. And I was never once judged at university by these two lecturers. And I struggled so much in a lot of my exams. And I remember Christopher Davis tailoring to the exam to me. He once said to me, there's nothing wrong with you, it's just your brain thinks differently to other people's. And I thought nothing of it then, but when I look back I think he knew that I was autistic for him to say that to me. And he said to me, we'll phrase the question. When he asked me a question, an exam question, he said, don't worry if you don't understand it, let's rephrase it another way so that you can understand it. And it made the world of difference to me, and I passed my exams. He didn't give me the answers, he just rephrased the question. And that comes back to autistic people sometimes misunderstanding questions, interview questions that are being asked of us, what people are telling us, information. And it can just help tremendously if somebody just tells it to us or asks us in a different way. And that's what he did, and that's what they did at that university. And they were so inclusive of my anxiety, because that's what it was diagnosed with at the time. It was diagnosed as anxiety. It was the best university ever. And it was at that university I learned to mask my interaction with other people. And I know masking is not always a positive thing, but it is for our well-being. If we're to get through our day-to-day life, we have to mask to some extent in order to progress in life, because if we didn't, we wouldn't progress. I mean, I dare say it's different for everybody, we're all different, but I certainly wouldn't have, in the job that I was in, or am in now, a healthcare profession, if I didn't mask, I wouldn't be accepted in the position that I'm in now. And so, although that's for another video, but it can have negative impacts on our life, masking, and it can lead to burnout. It's fundamental for us to get on with our lives and have the same sort of quality of life, not quality of life, but the same sort of existence as a neurotypical person. Not quality of life, because it doesn't have a good effect on quality of life. But they was just the best, most supportive people to me. And although I spent hours in the library on my own while all my friends was partying, I would go to the library to study. And again, I used to go and I wore a hat so that nobody could look me in the eyes. And I didn't really have any relationships. And so as an autistic person, I missed out on friendships and relationships. I didn't have I think I had one boyfriend, and he had suspected autism, so he understood me. But I missed out on all of that socialising and parties and staying out till dead late at night and doing what non-autistic people, not everyone, obviously we're all different, but what most people who don't have autism do. And I feel like in many ways autism, although it's a positive thing, and I wouldn't change my diagnosis because it makes me who I am, it's stopped me from being the person that I wish I could have been, or being the person I wish I could be, because of my anxiety and because of all of these barriers, and they are barriers, all of these struggles and these difficulties. And that brings me to getting a job. I left the health service I left the NHS, I'm getting tongue tied, it's so cold. I left the university on the Friday and I started a job on the Monday, and that's only because I knew the manager in that organisation. And I worked in the health service. It was incredibly stressful, incredibly challenging, and from that I learnt to mask my autism symptoms even more. And I worked for about 20 years in the health service, masking and struggling. And then I hit problems when I started to hit burnout, because you can only mask, you can only put an act on for so long. And then I started to get tired, and problems started to arise with my social interaction. I wasn't able to interact as well with other people. I had to start saying, I think there's something different about me, I think I might be autistic, which didn't go down very well, unfortunately. And I hit more and more problems where I ended up leaving due to stress. And a lot of autistic people can relate to what I've just said. We can mask and we can work our way up, but we can only do it for so long until eventually we crash and everything can just come falling down. So although you might look at me and you might think she's in a good job, I'm not. I only work part-time and I have help from people around me because I do struggle. But you might look at me and think she's okay, she's got no problem, she's confident, she wears nice clothes, whatever, I don't know what you might think of me. It's not always the case. Appearances can be deceptive. I am acting as I'm talking to you now. I'm acting. My life's one big act. It's fake. My life's fake. Unless I'm at home on my own with my cats, then it's truthful. But other than that, my life is fake. What you're seeing isn't real. A bit like social media in general. Autistic people, we struggle tremendously in every aspect of our lives. And I've had a tremendously difficult childhood and upbringing and adulthood, and I'm sure it'll still be tremendously difficult into old age. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've not babbled on too much, but I want you to know that if you have suffered from an eating disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder, or you feel misunderstood, that you're not on your own. I understand how you feel completely. I understand good days and I understand bad days. And what I do know is that if you're feeling low, it is just temporary. Tomorrow, I know people have always say this, don't they? Tomorrow's a new day. But tomorrow is a new day. You don't know what's around the corner. You might meet somebody that you fall in love with and get married. You might buy a lottery ticket. I'm not advocating that you buy lottery tickets because it's gambling, but what I'm saying, you understand what I'm saying? You might win a load of money. You might find £10 on the floor. You might meet somebody who becomes your best friend. You might save somebody's life. What I'm saying is, don't judge how you're feeling on that particular moment. Just take a step back. I've been there. It's for another video. Depression, anxiety is for another video. But I just want you to take from this video that I understand the struggles of autism. I completely get it. Don't always believe what you see on social media. And that goes for everybody, autistic people and non-autistic people. Because believe me, life is not sugar-coated. Okay? So you're not on your own, and I want you to know that. If you can relate or you've enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and like and comment on this video. And I shall see you for my next video. I'm going to go home now and get a hot water bottle because it's blooming cold. Cheerio.